Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of M365 Voice. My name is Sarah Hazy.
And I am Mike Madarani.
And I'm Antonio Mayo.
And as we were talking and prepping before we decided to record today's episode, we're going to take you down a path of talking about a specific topic. I was bringing up how I use Planner in my day-to-day life to be able to really structure small projects and to be able to run stand-up or weekly stand-up meetings for different projects that are, again, relatively small in scope, maybe 100 tasks or less, and how things that I've seen that have worked well and things that I've seen that have not worked well in using Planner for those types of small projects. What do you think?
Yeah, I like it. I'm a lightweight user of Planner, but I do enjoy the use of Planner when I use it.
We've started to use it, I'll say in the last year and a half, started to use it much more heavily on projects that are, I'll say, small to medium size, certainly not large projects, because I find that it still is not great for large projects. Where you've got a really large backlog of activities. We tend to lean more on DevOps for that kind of thing when you've got a lot of user stories and you're manage them according to an agile board. It's a little bit different. But for medium projects or small projects, we have started to use a lot more heavily. And I think you're right, Sarah. When you end up in those kinds of projects, you end up in meetings where, okay, let's review the planner board. Let's see where all the tasks are at.
Yeah, I think so. I've actually played around with Planner I've seen it used in projects that are too large in scope and it can't meet the requirements for really running either a formally agile project where you really need that agile board view to be able to manage things, or for large projects where you need a full, like Microsoft project, you need a very formalized project plan because of all of the different dependencies and things. I also have tried using Planner for basically managing individual tasks that I have for a project. I don't find that very useful either. I tend to use Outlook tasks, but I know we've talked about that before for my personal tasks, and I don't tend to like to list them both in Planner and in Outlook tasks or Planner and To Do. But for these small to mid-sized projects where you're trying to live out loud in an area where everybody can see what's happening, I think Planner has become a sweet spot for that.
Now, in your world, do you use it inside Teams, or do you have a Teams created for it, or you always have Planner most of the time, just Planner standalone with no Teams in the backend?
That's a really interesting question, because whenever I use Planner, I never use it within the frame of the Teams desktop app. I always open up Planner in my browser.
Okay. Interesting. I'm the opposite. We always use it in the context of a team. So for us, whenever we start a project, a new team is created for that project. It's kind of an automatic process in our company. And depending on the nature of the project, if there's multiple people on it, usually more than two, and if there are meaningful number of tasks over a period of time, again, small to medium project, then we'll create a planner within the team, and then it'll become a tab in our team.
I'm a mix between both of you, actually. I use it if I am I'm working on a few projects. So if I am inside a project, I go to the team, it is inside that team, and I manage my tasks. But sometimes I'm like, what should I work on today? I have like a few tasks from a couple of projects. I would go actually to the planner, because there you see all your plans, and you go and navigate to your actual plan, and you go to that project.
This is already interesting, and just how we like to, and it really does come down to preference. I think user preference and how we prefer to do it. Many of the things that I think I want to talk about today as I go through Planner is certainly preferences about how I like to use it. I'm going to be fascinated because we already know that Mike likes to work differently than I do. I mean, his inbox, my inbox, like they're complete opposites. His way of using OneNote, my way of using OneNote. So, I mean, this is going to be good.
We'll see if we have some common grounds here.
That rarely happens, but it'll be fascinating. Let's do it. All right, I'm going to share my screen and let's go in and take a look. So there we go. You can see my screen. I've got a planner plan here. I created it as a fake planner plan for the purposes of this session. I named it Project Xena. First thing that came to mind was Xena Warrior Princess. I have no idea why, but that's what we created. So I kind of thought I'd step through a couple of things about how I like to use Planner and have you both react to it and let me know what you like or what you don't like.
Okay.
How does that sound?
That sounds good.
So first thing, when I'm in the board view for Planner, I like to define different buckets, which you can see here I have 3, one for project scope, one for design, one for build. I like to define different buckets. I hold myself at the volume of buckets that will fit left to right on my screen without scrolling left to right, because I cannot stand it when I have to scroll left to right to see all the buckets.
Yeah, agreed.
What do you think?
Yep, I'm the same way.
Agreed. I tend to forget about the buckets if they're off screen and I have to scroll.
Right. So sometimes I'll build a bucket and then I'll subdivide it into 2 buckets and then I'll combine some together. And I do like to drag my tasks from one bucket to another. So for example, I could take one and I can literally just drag and drop it from one bucket to another bucket, but I tend to optimize at about 4 or 5 buckets max because that's what fits on my monitor left to right.
Yeah. And I find my buckets, my buckets tend to be similar to yours where the name or nature of the bucket aligns with where the task is and getting done, right? Like not started, in progress, completed, or something in between like that. Something that defines where it is in the project status. My buckets tend to align like, which I think yours do there.
Yeah, I tend to like them to either be topic based in terms of like what type of work it is or what stage in a project or what stage in an implementation it would be. I tend to read, I mean, obviously I read left to right, so I like to have my buckets reflect a left to right ordering in general. Yeah. So as you can see here, usually if I'm starting a project and I run a lot of I'll say project stand-up calls where I'm sharing my screen and we're talking through a project in 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes every week or 2 weeks for a project. I like to come in and start with just doing a brain dump of tasks. So I'll literally come in here and I'll click on a task for a bucket and I'll say design milestone 1, hit enter, and then I'll type in another one, design milestone 2, and hit enter. And I basically just go through and start adding in a bunch of tasks by doing a quick entry, as I like to call it. But then one of the things that I actually love to do is when we have a project meeting, I'll actually come in here and go from the board view over to the schedule view. And one of my favorite things to do is to actually assemble a timeline for the tasks based on the schedule view. When you come in here, you can see our calendar and I can actually take tasks. And if we agree that we want to confirm project resources and have that done by, let's say, March 4th, I can just drag and drop it over to March 4th. I could then move on to basically next month and I can start dragging other items over into that time frame. And we can literally be on a call. We can identify timelines for things. We can move tasks between timelines. And if I just do this for everything and drag everything over to some kind of a date, so we can see what this looks like, here's what happens. Once we get everything landed on a date, if I go back from the schedule view to the board view, you can now start to see that I have due dates on all of my tasks based on going through that schedule view and dragging and dropping them over. So I didn't have to go in and define it for each individually. It was a group activity to kind of try and build a schedule.
That's cool.
That's pretty cool. I like that.
I didn't even know you could do that.
So I find that that's a handy way to run things. So far, we're generally in agreement. Let me put out an idea that gets hotly debated. Assignment of tasks. I am a believer that I use a RACI model when I think about task assignment. So RACI means responsible, accountable, consult, and inform. If I'm going to assign a task to someone, I generally want to assign a task to one person who is responsible and accountable for the completion of that task. Many times I work with people who want to assign every person who may have a part to play in that task to the task.
I think that gets to, I agree with you. I think it should be the person that's responsible for the task that gets assigned. and only them or only, the small group of people that's responsible. Because it gets too hard to know, okay, what are my tasks if I'm on every single task?
Yeah, I'm the same way because I really hate it if you have multiple people assigned the same task and you have to add a checklist inside a task. So you don't know exactly the checklist. You cannot assign a checklist to a specific person. So I'm like, okay, who's doing that checklist? So, and then you're gonna have to start going into comments and adding comments, and just kind of defeats the purpose of an actual task.
Yeah,
that's how I look at it.
Wow, we all agreed on that. I want to talk though about this whole task list idea, Mike, because I've started actually using them in my planner plans, and I used to hate them, and now I've started using them a lot more regularly. So if I click into a task here, what we're really talking about is this checklist down here, where you can type in specific items from a checklist perspective. So do this one thing, and then I'll say Antonio is going to own that one thing. And if I hit enter, do this other thing, Mike, do the third thing, Sarah. So if you enter in a checklist set of items and you check the show on card, when I close out of this task, you can now see that the different items are here. And what's nice is that you can look at them and you can check off the subtasks, but there's no way to assign a subtask to a person. Like usually I see it where you put somebody's name on it, but who do you assign the task to? Do you assign the task to all three of us because we each have a subtask, or do you just assign it to one of us whose job it is to make sure that the rest of us get our stuff done for that task?
Exactly. And one thing I would like to have, maybe we'll just talk to the product group about it, is if you check off all those checklists, for me, I would love to see that the actual task is completed. Because if you have a task and you divide a checklist because you have 5 things you have to do, when you finish them all, it should be finished. Similar to a project plan, you finish things in the sub plans, in the subtasks. Yeah, that it doesn't work that way in Planner.
That drives me crazy too, because you can see here that the check mark says 3 of 3 subtasks are completed. You go in, you can see that they're all completed, but the progress still says not started. It doesn't even give you, like if you're checking off the checklist items, should it move it to automatically in progress even, or completed if they're all done? It doesn't do any of that.
Yeah. That would be nice. That would be a handy little thing there. I can see some cases where you wouldn't necessarily want it to automatically mark the whole thing completed because you got the checklist done, but I could see cases where you would. Perhaps a pop-up asking you, do you want to complete this task? I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
It should at least put it in progress, though.
I know for me, if I'm facilitating project stand-up meetings that have a planner plan, I am diligent with saying that I want only one person assigned as the owner of the task, because that's the person who's held accountable for the task being done. And if, Mike, you need to consult with Antonio or inform others about something related to the task, ultimately, you're the one who needs to come out and do the stuff and mark it off as complete.
Yeah.
The other thing that I'm finding that I use a lot more in Planner is the add a label. So if you come out to add a label when you're in a task, it gives you color coding labels that you can assign to your tasks. What I really like to do is not only to use the color coded labels, but I like to edit the labels. So if for this particular one, for example, I'll go ahead and edit this to say leadership alignment, just to make up something, and then go ahead and select it. I like to be able to select multiple different colors to represent multiple different types of work. And then I actually like being able to look at the planner plan and seeing those different colors and what they mean to be able to kind of see what's upcoming.
I think that's cool. That is a nice little feature to be able to color code them or label them.
Yeah, I like that. I don't use it much, but I think the way you've described it makes a lot of sense.
Can you sort by the labels, Sarah?
That's a good question.
Feel like you can.
You can filter by labels.
Okay.
So I just came over in the right-hand column to the filter section. And if I go to the labels, for example, that leadership alignment one that I just created, I can filter based on that.
Nice.
and you can see that you have a ton of different colors. I know that they greatly increase the volume of colors.
Yeah.
I do find myself spending an inordinate amount of time changing the colors into colors that I think look pretty with a background. I don't know if that's really useful, but I do it.
You can group by label. I think if you go into the group by bucket side, and then you can group by labels.
Ah, look at that.
Yeah, that's nice.
I like it. I don't tend to use that either, but I think that is helpful. I do use the group by due date because sometimes if you're looking, especially from a project perspective, what's coming due within the next week versus the future versus today versus things that are already outdated. I think some of these filters and group bys are actually really helpful.
I do find though, like planner plans, like I said earlier, we're using them more and more on projects, especially ones that are long running with tasks that require multiple people to contribute to those tasks to get something delivered. I find the plan you need to be diligent about managing it because it's really easy to kind of forget about it and focus on your tasks, and then you go back to it a few weeks later and it's okay, this is completely wrong and not up to date. So it does require like a weekly review or a weekly or, sometimes daily, depending on the project, maybe every few days, some sort of a stand-up meeting to review what's there and get it updated by people. I don't find people generally, myself included, are very good about going and updating the tasks themselves. Maybe that's just me. I don't know, but.
Well, I don't think it is. I heard somebody say recently that it doesn't matter what task management or project planning solution that you use. All of them will only be as good as you are about going and actually providing detail and checking off tasks.
Exactly.
So whether you're using Outlook tasks, To Do, Planner, or anything else, whether or not it works is entirely dependent on what you put into it.
Yeah.
Not the technology itself.
Yeah, agreed.
It brings me joy to check off tasks. It brings me joy to color code my Outlook calendar. And it brings me joy to have an inbox near zero. So we know that, right? So if these things bring me joy, then I'm going to spend time doing that.
Actually, I'm the same as Antonio and you as well, that I finish my task. I don't go back to Planner or any other project management system, but it brings me joy when I'm like, yeah, I have to go update my tasks and like close. It's like, yeah,
yes, yes, yeah. I do get joy out of doing that in my Outlook tasks. Very much marking things done. I did see some interesting features coming, so I happen to be checking the roadmap. I did see some interesting features coming for Planner. We're supposed to be getting recurring tasks in March. So that'll be kind of cool to be able to have recurring tasks that happen. Yeah. And I don't know if it's there. This is supposed to be coming in February, but I haven't seen anything about it yet. But rich text and images in the Planner task notes. So to be able to actually go and do that in your Planner task notes.
That's actually really interesting. I think that would be pretty cool to be able to have that in there.
Agreed.
Yeah, I don't have it yet in my tenant, so yeah.
No? Okay, so it's still coming. But yes, we're supposed to be able to get that, because I do find that people do try, it looks and feels like an agile board, right? Mm-hmm. And people do try to use it sometimes for user stories. And sometimes that requires some formatting of the text that's in the notes, or images can really help people to understand what that task is about. So as opposed to having to point someone to go to somewhere else to look for the details of the task, that can be handy for putting it into here in a nicely formatted way.
I think it would be amazing. And I certainly hope that they uphold the great standard that Teams has, where you can copy and paste an image and paste it into a Teams chat and it renders beautifully.
Yeah.
I use that all the time. For example, do a select all in a PowerPoint slide, copy it, paste it into a Teams chat, and it actually renders very nicely.
Yeah, agreed. That would be nice to have here too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, one of the cool features actually, and I was a victim of it before, is the ability to move, that was released in November, the ability to move tasks to any view plans. And I always have had that. Mistakes happen to me all the time. I'll be in a plan and I found out that I moved out of the plan to a different plan. I start creating tasks and I'm like, oh, this is the wrong place. And I have to go and delete them recreate them. So that feature is pretty cool.
To be able to move a task between plans?
Between plans, yeah.
That is cool.
If you create the wrong plan, I think that that's really, I think that that is well played as well, but I think it'll be a key feature for being able to do that. And yeah, I like that. So we've talked quite a bit about Planner. The thing that I think is still interesting is I think just like personal task management, personal calendar management, I feel like Planner is becoming more personal by the day in terms of preferences for how people want to run small to mid-sized projects using Planner. And a lot of it comes down to the best practices of who leans into it the most or maybe cares about the Planner plan the most.
Agreed.
Yeah. I've been pushing it heavily with some of our teams because I find it's easy for us to, when we start working on a project, to lose sight of where certain milestones come in or certain deliverables come into customers. And we create project plans and so on in various formats. But having that regular review, I find, is much more effective when it's a board like that, and you can see everything laid out on the board. Like you made a couple of comments earlier, Sarah, that I thought were really helpful around being able to, have everything in the view that you can see, so not going off the screen. I think that's really important. And then you said another thing that I really liked. What was it? Was it thinking out loud or working out loud on a project? Where you're trying to establish, okay, what are the things we're going to do in this project? And working, I think it was working out loud. I thought that was a good way to put it, because you want to involve other people also in kind of the planning of the project, or at least I try to do that. So it's not just me, it's not just what's in my head, it's us as a team figuring out what are the tasks and where do they fit in and what's the right way to organize it and what's each person going to do. And I find people appreciate that, where it's more than just one person kind of dictating what a project's going to be, but it's the people coming together to figure it out.
I think that that's really pivotal. And I know when I worked on Agile teams before, where they've had an Agile team, a coordinator for the team, and we had daily stand-ups or weekly stand-ups, right, around a traditional physical board when we were in the office. And I always remember having that key Agile coordinator. Nope, we put that down on the wrong colored Post-it note. We got to get it on the right color of Post-it note to be able to put it on the board in the right place. Yeah. I almost feel like Planner for me is becoming something similar. It's a digital board, but really using it in the same construct. But just in the way that the physical board was important, and the color of Post-its and the cultural rhythms that you built around how you integrated with that physical board are some of the same things that I'm figuring out in Planner in terms of the rules of the road. But a lot of that is personality based, right? They might be the rules of the road of how I like to organize my board and my colors of Post-its. The interesting bit is when you have different unique individuals coming together and working teams and how they built the rhythm. So on that note, I really like this discussion, and not a single, we were pretty unified on this, which for those of you, if you've listened to previous episodes, when we talk about things like email or OneNote or other things, we oftentimes have very different opinions. So this one was interesting. All right. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in. We hope you join us again for another episode.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.